Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Travis Sylvester, and today we're going to be covering splines and also finishing out our gap video and showing you guys how special these tools really are. So today we're going to be using the 47 Cadillac as our example. And we're going to go into how does a spline work, what are they used for? Splines come in different thicknesses for different curvatures. A spline is something that can be used for several different things, one of which, if you're trying to check a curvature, like these cars that are big and roundy, or maybe you're checking a car that's perfectly flat with a straight edge, it's critical that you understand what the shape needs to be. Not all the times are you able to grab a block and rely on making that shape perfect until you have sculpted it. And this really boils down to when you're actually doing filler work from one end to another, you have to have your setup correctly before you can do your finished work with the gap. How we do that is we take the spline and we very lightly with our fingertips push it from edge to edge, and then it will show the actual representation in this area on whether you had this shape correct or not. It doesn't show because we don't have a light for this area, but we've already kind of mapped out. As you go and move the panel, the spline up the panel, you are checking areas on where you have the light source come through. That way you can map it out and say, hey, I have a big low right here in this area or in this area. Everything out here we've worked and splined already to get that general shape. And the point that I'm making is that let's just say you guys metal finished the entire car. There was 0 dents in the door, 0 dents in the fender, everything was perfect. Well, in 47, and a lot of other years, all the way up into the 70s until now, cars never fit like they do where they were seamless. So when you're actually checking the panel, you are using filler to do this work. I know most guys look at these cars and they say, wow, you guys used a lot of filler. And they look at it negatively. And the problem with that is filler is used to correct the shape of the entire car. The whole reason that we lock these panels in and do this is so you're creating one shape and one reflection that's perfect from front to back. So your setup is everything that you do, and as you check it, maybe it's a Dodge Dart and it's super flat and you can use the straight edge, or maybe it's a very curved Cadillac like this one. So what we're gonna do here is we've already marked out our lows, and we are going to come in and we are going to spread the same filler, Rage Ultra with Rage Ultra Extra that you guys have seen in the other previous videos. And we are going to spread it smooth beyond our pencil mark, showing us where it is. The small tick marks is just references that I was using to give me the general idea of where the light was coming through in that low. So if you looked at this car from the back to the front, there's just something not right in this area, and that's where the spline came in to check. We're gonna mix up some filler right now, and then when we come back to the panel and we get it spread, we're gonna show you how these things truly work. We are going to be coming out beyond our pencil mark and spreading this as nice and even as we can. Focusing on pressing this into all of the scratches that we have. I don't really have to worry about the gap yet. We're going to cover that in the end of this video. And then also, we're filling 2 lows, and sometimes you may or may not get both lows with that one sweep, and sometimes you will. You might have to dial back and just focus on one low and then there's another one that's up here. The spline is what's going to give you the general shape. If you don't have the general shape from the beginning, you might spend hundreds of hours doing body work only to realize at the end when you get done and you prime the car you thought you were done, that you have a wave in the panel right in this area, and there's not enough primer in the world that's going to get this to look correctly. I know this seems excessive, what we're putting on, but you have to remember this is just to get the shape. A majority of this all comes off. We're not left with very much. Just like all the other videos where we've showed body filler, the biggest key element here is always making sure that your edges here are blended out. Otherwise, you'll battle this entire area trying to make something look smooth. Notice I'm sweeping it up to the center where I know the area is low, and then I'm grabbing the top and I'm bringing it down also. You want to make this like the plateau to be able to create this shape. We do the same thing on the sides, bring it in. And it doesn't matter if you load a bunch up in the center because we're going to spline this. And if you spline this, you're going to have voids as you go. That's the reason we put this on thicker. At this point, I like to have the spreader handy, out of your way, so that way when you bring this up, you don't hit it. So, put it in here. This spline is made by Melomotive. They're out of Australia, I believe. And here we want to be spreading our fingers wide as if you were using a spreader nice and smooth. And we want to be focusing on the area that we know is good. We put the pencil line in here, so that's the area inside. And we're using what's already good and flat to be able to come in and let this drag along those areas to create that shape. And as you work this thing up, sometimes this might take you a few swipes. For example, you can see, just because we put on, here's our pencil line that shows up, and here's all of our voids that's not there. Well, we have some back on here. We need to grab this back off and reapply it in these areas that are super low. It's also good that if you have, the reason that we like the Rage Ultra and the Extra is because you have this work time. If we can see right in this area it's not hitting, then we need to come back and grab our filler that we have left on the board and come back in and excessively build this edge so that way it's a smooth spread. Like I said, when you're using these splines, they're not for everybody. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but you kind of have to build this. And there's nothing wrong with maybe you didn't have enough filler and you guys spline it, and if this is still low, you took what was a big low area and now it's smaller. Block it out and then re-skim it, but now you have a smaller area that's affected, and then you can create this shape. So we're going to come back in, we're all cleaned off. Nice even pressure. Nice and slow. That's what you want. You want to see the filler grabbing the entire thing. Now you can see we've recreated this shape really good, but we're still missing some in here. If you have work time, then you can continue to keep working this until you get this thing looking good in one shot. We still have some work time. We're going to continue adding. Here we go again, third run. Now you can see we're actually getting the shape. We just have two voids here and a little baby one here. This isn't bad. You could stop right here. We still have enough work time. We can just continue to keep trying to refine this. A lot of you guys that are new to spreading filler, I do not recommend going right to splines. This is kind of for more of the advanced guys that have been doing this a while, because most guys have this filler up to their neck just with the spreader, let alone doing a spline. Here we go again for the third run, or the fourth run. Again, a little better, very small voids. Let's see. It's starting just barely to set up. You can also come in and just feather things out without the spline. You have the majority of the shape, and you're going to leave this a little bit high. I'm going to come in and I'm going to add this excess down here, because the more you take off, the more you're not going to get the shape. So we're adding it down here so that way it ends up at the top. Fifth run. There we go. I'm not going to sweat that. That's about as good as you're going to get, especially with one swipe. We'll come back as this dries. You guys have watched the other videos where we watch filler and we get it in the right time. You shouldn't have to work hard at this. It should go easily to your sanding. And the other big thing is, we preach it all the time, feathering this edge. Look at how good this edge is feathered to the point where you have a pencil line showing. Here gets you the roughed in shape, and then you can come back in with your block, and we're gonna get into those blocks next, which we're gonna show the next level blocks. So we're gonna clean this up, and we'll catch you guys back here in a minute. All right, we've got everything that's starting to set up. Also, like we've talked about before, you're watching this to make sure you're not letting this dry all the way. You want to do this in the stage where you can see your finger mark, but you're not moving filler. You're not affecting the shape that we just created. And right here, while it's still soft, you want to make sure you come in with a nice new razor blade. And we can see a little dimple right here. We're just going to put it in, and we're going to cut this out. It's going to ride on the edge of the door and on the edge of the quarter. And then you can just pull this thing right out. There we go. And again, this isn't super critical, because we're gonna come back and show you guys those fancy gap tools, right? Now, I'm cutting this completely on the fly, and the gaps are not perfectly crisp. I want to show you guys a good demonstration, so I'm purposely going to screw up this edge. And let's just say you cut this too far over, and oh no, our gap is super wide to crisp, it's all over the place. And the new, it's not new, well it's new to us. We bought those from True Blocks. All the stuff we're talking about will be in the link in the description. Check it out. But these tools are super awesome because they are made of a plastic that is not, I know you guys are gonna say, oh, I can get this stuff at Home Depot, but how much time are you gonna take to make these things and make them perfect? There's a bunch of different shapes. They're already 3/16 in width to be able to create whatever gap. And if you say, well, I have a foreign car or I'm doing a Pantera or whatever and the gap isn't 3/16, the kit comes with several different thicknesses. You can pick and choose for what you need. We'll come back to these to show you guys how awesome these things work. And then now we need to start shaving this down with 80 grit. The next thing we want to show you guys, I've kind of talked about them in the past. This is a next level block. The website's like Wild Rides in Fabrication. It's a really awesome block because it's not creating bad tendencies from the start. A lot of the blocks that you see, and I know I like linear blocks and I like different big kid blocks, but I also talk about all the different brands that we have and how I constantly use a different brand for a different project. I might even use all 3 manufacturers or all 5 or whatever we have on one car. I do not have a one size fits all, but I do have favorites. And this block is the thickest block that he sells. It's 1/2 inch thick. It is longer. I like the fact that this has a foam top. And the reason is when you are trying to create a flat car, or even if it's a rounded car like we're doing, and you're trying to create a shape, the biggest thing you do is you're going to take your thumbs and make sure that the block contours to the car. You want the longest block and the thickest block for the shape that you are trying to create. And then it goes down to hand placement. The one thing all blocks have an issue with is most guys will do something like this, and then when they start blocking this, they create a low around all the area that they filled, and it's a constant battle. You will spend all day battling this. But what you need to remember is, as long as your hand placement is correct and light. I block almost all the cars with just 4 fingers. I let the block ride on the filler, and I do it when it is still to the point where it's not all the way hardened. By doing that, you are letting the block create your shape. If this is rolling, it's too soon. You want this to be a dust like it is, where it just comes off and it's not clogging up your sandpaper. If your sandpaper is not super gritty and new, this is also going to create yourself a different issue. What's going to happen is if this sandpaper is worn out, it will just glide over this and not cut this down into shape. As you are blocking this, where your hands should be is over the filler. In this case, we have a big section. We are going to make sure that as we block this, our hand does not go beyond the filler. You'll also notice the pencil line showing up. As the pencil line starts to show up out here, we know to stop. That is our guideline. As you see the pencil line, you are going back to ground zero. We had all this perfect and finished in 80 grit. So as you get the pencil line showing, you need to stop before you see any kind of metal showing or anything that's going to stop you from shaping this, and then upgrade to the next grit. If we're in 80 grit right now, you think about this like you're looking at this from a magnifying glass from way up here, and then as you come down into 120 grit, you're a little closer. 150 grit, you're a little closer. 220, and every time you are making this better and better and better. We're gonna block this out very carefully, the cool thing that you're seeing is that because you use that spline, you're not doing a small spread here and a small spread here. You're doing one swipe that is creating a shape, and it is grabbing all of the filler. You want to be doing the X pattern in about a 30-degree angle. I am not pushing hard. So focus on your hand placement. Try to stay as much on the filler as you can. Let this, even if you're rocking the edge into this tight crevice here of the door, look how fast that takes shape. Instantaneously. Here, we're going to run in a problem where we are hitting our fender. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the next block shorter, which is this length here, and I'm going to finish working this out, and this will feather out really quickly. The other thing I'm going to show you is, even if you're using a block, hand placement is so critical because I can take out a dent that's only this big with a long block, and I cannot affect anything outside of it. That is how important this is. And if you use the pencil as your guide, or guide coat, whatever you guys want to use, it gives you a visual that you are not taking material away. As long as that guide coat and or pencil is still there, you have not made this any lower than when you first started. All right, we've grabbed the exact same thickness block that we were using. Again, talking about the thumb test, you can see that it creates the shape we need. And I will put my fingers around this block to make sure that we do not dig our fender that has a radius in it. You want to stay away from it. You also do not want to put your hand placement over the area that's already perfect. We've already made that good, so stay within your means. Sometimes you're using one hand to just push and pull, and you're using the other hand to just guide this block only right here. That was my glove. To be able to feather this out. If you have a hard edge, this is the hardest thing you guys are going to battle, is a hard edge, because what's happening is if you wait for this to dry, you're going to sit here and push on this hard, and then you just created a low right here. That's why this is important that you do this when it is soft, so it's easy to feather out and you do not affect it. Let me grab a pencil. If you grab a pencil, just to show you guys what I'm referring to, and we go, hey, we know all this over here is good. As long as your pencil line stays there, you have not lowered that area. It was already good. You can put your hand right in here. And you're verifying as you go through that this is, it might get scratched, that's fine, but it's not removing any material. How critical is this? You can go like this. We know everything in here is good. Yes, I'm using a longer block. If I want to wear this down, yes, it's a curve, but I can tell you that even on a flat panel with this same block, if you use one hand, it will only be sanding in the area that you are working. If you take your hands and you place them out, very light touch, you then erase the pencil uniformly. When do you stop? That is key. Well, we know we have a void here from when we spreaded it. We can see we have a little void here, but we also have this that we still have to work out. Now, because this is all cleaning up, I like to clean up my edges. So a lot of times I will go to a smaller block. And I want to just show you guys Next level has an array of different shapes. Maybe you're doing a 30s Ford with a belt line and it has that shape that you can then sand into a tight area and still keep uniformity. They also have blocks that have different edges, so you can then make all of this flat, and when you want to come in to feather out next to a fender lip, they've already cut the chamfer in it, so that way you can come and roll up to that fender and not remove material, and you're watching your pencil line. So it would be the reverse of this. When you're sanding this, you would have your pencil line out here to know that this is already straight and good, and we don't want to remove material. So you can come in and do a nice smooth spread and use these things to feather them out. Next Level Blocks is actually out of Canada, and although he does not have a discount code for us, he did say if you guys email him, and if there is a comments box, I'm not sure, mention that you saw these on Sylvesters's Customs YouTube channel, and he will hook you guys up. Because the thing is, if you're in the US, in the States, the transfer rate from Canada to the US, you actually save a pretty good amount on buying his blocks. So it's another little benefit that you get from it. Going back to this block has a radius in it, so it makes it really handy to be able to roll into these radiuses. And as long as you go long motion and know what you're taking off, you're not affecting it and you're keeping that radius. It's not gonna dig in. There's an array of blocks you can use for any one shape. When you are coming in and taking care of these hard edges, even though I'm using a small block, I'm going to be using a light touch with just 2 fingers. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to focus my fingers on the hard edge and just feather that area out. We just talked about how you can take a long block and hold it in the center and it will only be grabbing in the center. You are doing the same thing here. And if you want proof of that, take your pencil line where you know it's good here and you know it's good here, and we want to get rid of this edge, so we are going to be focusing on just the edge. Check it out. Pencil line stays. And when the pencil line starts to go away, you are just becoming flush and you can see that it's cleaned up. Now we can feather out all of this stuff. And you just cruise around and make sure everything is feathered out. But again, if you're not focusing on that edge and feathering it out, you are wearing what you've already made flat to a low. Take this thing, go all the way around your perimeter. Okay, we're feathered out completely, and we did it in a matter of minutes. We didn't work hard, I didn't break a sweat. You can then come right back to your 80 grit. We have currently no filler or no primer showing, and we don't see any filler showing in what we've spread. So we can continue to work this down. You don't want something that has so much filler that you're losing the shape that it is. We're just trying to keep the shape consistent with the rest of the car. So we are going to hold this lightly, hands placed evenly in the filler area, and we are going to go until these things start to come out. A lot of guys will find a void like this and they will sit here and they will stare at that void and block this thing until that disappears. But what happens is that creates a flat spot here and you're not keeping this consistent shape. Now, if primer or another filler color that you had from before shows up, you need to stop, because then you're losing the shape. And then you can come back, and then now you can pencil this. Like, I can almost tell you, and it might not, but this is a low that we're going to have to address. And now we're just going to come back and skim this little area, which was 2 massive areas of a problem. Now that you have everything uniform, you have now created this shape. We're in 80 grit still. If you want to double check your work, you can come back with the spline now, put your fingers on there and verify there is no more air gap. You fixed a big problem, created a mirror finish in minutes, and you didn't have to break a sweat. At this point, you would move to filling this, and when you have the same exact result and this is completely flush, you can then put 120 grit, 150 grit, 80 grit, whatever you're going to work up to. At that point, you're not removing incorrect shapes or dents. At that point, you're just removing scratches and refining this process. The problem is if you have areas that are showing, you've gone too far, you're now taking away, it's a bump stop. It's not allowing you to keep blocking that. So you have to keep enough filler on the car, and what's actually left, as you can see, is very minimal. So we're gonna jump right into, we're gonna clean up this edge here, and we're gonna show you guys the True Blocks gapping tool that makes your gaps precise, 3/16, exactly all the way around. Again, we don't wanna make these edges out of filler. You want to spend the time like we did in the part 1 of this and weld your gaps till they're perfect from the beginning. Now that we've got the shape correct on the car, we need to focus on our gap. So we're going to use the True Blocks gap tools. What you want to do is take a small piece of 80 grit and round the edges of your corners so that way you don't have a hard edge. If you leave a hard edge, it's not going to adhere well. You want to make sure that when you put this filler in against this tool, it has a really good adhesion, and it's not going to make it perfect all the way in. It's just going to give you that faced off edge that's perfect panel to panel. We talked about not creating a low and sanding into things that are good. Well, we already know this is all perfect now. We can just take this tool and set it in. We're going to use tape to hold the bottom edge to start. I'm going to mix up some filler, show you guys how we get it spread up against this tool. I am using a plastic spreader only because it just works good sometimes for pushing the filler into this little gap that you're seeing. The other thing is, if you guys have noticed, the filler is a different color. When we do a big spread, we mix 50-50 with Ultra Extra and Ultra. This is just Ultra, and the reason is if you mix the two, the whole thing that you're gaining is a work window, right? But at the same time, when you mix the two, you're also getting a lot runnier of a consistency, and we don't want runny because runny will just flow right back out of that gap and you'll have another low. So I've got that side kind of pressed in, and then we're gonna do the exact same thing and repeat it on the other side of the door. I'm gonna finish spreading this in this door side, swipe it, keep it high, and then we'll bring you guys back when we remove this tool. Now that the filler's all set up, I can show you guys how this thing comes out. Very carefully. This thing's held in there pretty good. It is a tight fit. Look at that. Almost nothing is left on this, and if what is left on it just comes right off. And then you can take some acetone, clean it all up for the next one. Whether you do this in sections or whether you do this all in one piece and put a whole bunch in, the big thing that we keep talking about with this particular panel is using your pencil to ensure this does not get affected. So do the same thing here for your gap. And we're going to bring this down with an 80 grit small block, same next level block we were showing you. And I'm just going to ride on the center. All right, we've come through. We have blocked down our edge, and you can see we have our pencil line left, so we can verify we have not made a low here. We still have this area up here, and I know this looks bad, but I actually ground the area on the door. And you also need to make sure that if you have a chrome belt, this has two pieces on each side that have to be overlapped and go into the edge, so you have to have clearance for all of your moldings if needed. Keep everything in consideration, continue to learn, share what you know, and we will see you guys next week. Hope you enjoyed it.